6:30. So good morning. This is Steve Moreland with Better Each Day, and it is March the 5th. We have a very special guest with us this morning, and our normal routine is to focus on the Gratitude Roundtable. We focus on Dr. Joe Dispenza's perspective of how to create our future by putting ourselves into that future event and activating all the what they call reticular activity sensory. So you're actually experiencing the future through your imagination, just like you use your imagination to experience your reality. And that's why your mind can't distinguish the difference between the two. That's our normal program. That's what we normally do. And we go with a gratitude roundtable, which is Sean Acor's perspective. And that perspective allows us to increase our performance by 31% by focusing on the immediate present moment and giving thanks and gratefulness for that. That increases our positive psychology is the technical term, and that positive psychology spills over into our entire day, our week, our month, because it's a practice of helping us focus on those things that are positive in our life instead of the negative self-talk that can be as much as 80% of our mental perspective, and therefore we don't accomplish as much as we wish we could. So today I want to introduce a man that I've had a chance to interview over a year, maybe a year and a half ago. I was so impressed with Kuldip that I introduced him to a number of my friends, and I have recently continued to introduce him to a number of individuals and catch up on his incredible project of what he is doing from basically a revamp or a reset of what healthcare delivery is going to look like in the future using artificial intelligence. So from that standpoint, that is just mind blowing what he's already doing, the abilities that he's having to change the way the current healthcare delivery model is failing us. We all know that. And how can it be done in a different way? So he's got an incredible background with General Electric. And when he talks about Jack Welch, he talks about him as if he's just a guy that he hung out with every other day. And that is because he did. And so it's pretty incredible just to hear his perspective at all the other startups and other technology companies and financial firms that he has led start up or move them forward to the next pace. All of that's impressive, but to me, the thing that really blew my mind is the challenge that was brought into his life. And I believe that's going to be about 6.5, 7 years ago. And I'm going to let him come in here and tell us a little bit about the background and what happened on in that timeline that really didn't just put an obstacle in his way, it put what felt like a Mount Everest in front of him. And because of his mental mindset, because of the questions he asked, because of the grit that he was able to exhibit, he took a terminal diagnosis and turned it around. And as you can see, he is here with us today, a healthy man. And more than that, he has now taken all of that experience and taking it back to make a difference in this world by changing the healthcare system that he had a first-hand chance of experiencing and realized that it could be done better. So, Kuldip, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you, and then we're going to dive into what happened with that prognosis, and then we're going to go through the mindset. What did it take to go through that? What were the questions in your mind? How did you have the audacity to take these medical professionals that told you, man, this is not looking good, and you decided in your mind to go past that and use all of your experience? So, Kuldip, jump in here and introduce yourself, my friend.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate the kind words about myself. To me, I've been living my life day at a time. And as significant and as much as people like to embellish what I've done and how I live my life, is nothing more than working with people like yourself on a daily basis. I was lucky that my dad was a diplomat. So I grew up all over the world. Washington, D.C. I was at the White House when Kennedy got inaugurated. I was in Burma when UNO was thrown out of the cabinet. I was in Kenya when Jomo Kenyatta was president. I was in Geneva when Jimmy Carter came over there. So these are all threads in my life. I learned two things. And actually, I would not be able to talk about my story till I go back and revisit two episodes in my life, two short stories. When I was 3 years old in Virginia Beach, I still remember vividly that day. Virginia Beach, we were there on a family, Sunday, and my dad gave me 2 cents or 3 cents and said, "Go grab a hot dog." I'm walking over there and walking towards the hot dog stand, and there was a lady over there with a chair, a red chair, I still remember, and a hand over there, hand sign. And they said, "Get to know your future." So I said, I can have a hot dog and I'll get hungry again in about half an hour. And I asked my dad for another 2 cents. I might as well get my future told. So I gave that lady 2 cents or 3 cents or whatever it was. And she told me some mumbo jumbo. Remember, I was only 3 or 4 years old.
Sure.
But I remember one thing. She said, "You're going to have a long life." So after that, I've lived life with a hop, skip, and jump. Enjoyed life. Didn't worry about anything else. Come what may come. And it served me well. Right. Fast forward, I was in Geneva in the early 70s. And there was a story, there was a small village somewhere in the countryside in Burgundy or somewhere else. Old gentleman celebrating his, I think, the 101st birthday. The whole town was there, big cake and all, and the guy was sort of literally sleeping in the chair.
Right.
And the lady interviewing the gentleman was asking in French, and after, what I could understand, and the real question was, what's the secret for a long life? Right. And he slowly raises his head, opens his eyes, and says, "Keep breathing."
Right.
Simple step, but something you can execute step by step.
Right. Simple.
So really, that's the genesis of me. I've had the wonderful experience of working in different cultures, different technologies, seeing people come and go. One thing is constant: people change, but we live in an interdependent society. Right. And as much as we all like to feel that we are really experts in our own fields and everything else, till you rely to trust other people, the person next to you, you cannot make progress in anything you do, whether it's aerospace. Jack mentioned that he works for Safran. I used to work for a company called General Electric, and I actually did the deal with Safran in the late 70s and 80s, where we have the GE Safran partnership for the CFM engines. And that's why all the 737s and all the Airbuses have GE Safran engines. Sure. So our world is interconnected, as much as we don't like to see that. Fast forward, wonderful background in medicine. I wanted to be a doctor.
Right.
I have the pleasure of working with 5 Nobel laureates. One of my classmates is a Nobel laureate now from Berkeley. One thing I learned about those people, working with them very closely, is the humility and their willingness to help others.
Okay.
Totally contrary to what people's opinions are. You mentioned Jack Welch. He hired me directly into GE. I met him in San Jose in a meeting over here. And we had just run into each other in a presentation. Right. And I was sitting in the front row. At the end of the presentation, he remembered, he called me up and said, "Kuldip," it was a Friday evening. He said, "Kuldip, I heard you, I liked you, you come from a technical background, you have got a huge international background. We're trying to make GE a global company from just an American company. And why didn't you come work for us?" On Monday morning, I was on GE's payroll.
Wow. Okay. That was it. Right.
It was that quick luck. And he did say a key phrase for me, which stuck with me my entire life. He said, "We won't pay you because you can make more money in Silicon Valley, but we'll train you." So I took that to heart to say, hey, life is a constant lesson. You have to live and grow. Right. When I was at Berkeley, I was working with a project where we were treating cancer patients. I wanted to be a doctor. I went to UCSF and all. Didn't quite become a doctor, but I've been involved in medical technology. So I'm very familiar with the healthcare technology and global health in a way. Fast forward to my situation. In 2014, I realized there was something wrong with me. The only thing that was wrong with me was I used to walk about 10 to 12 miles a day, and suddenly I could only walk about 1 to 2. Okay. I could drive for 10 hours. I could function. I could do everything properly. But I knew something was wrong. Went to the doctor, came back. They did my blood chemistry and everything else and came back and said, "Kuldip, you have the blood chemistry of a 25-year-old. No triglycerides, no blood pressure, nothing. And in fact, my doctor joked and said, you should write a book because at your age, everyone should have this kind of outcomes.
Right.
But I went out on a mini vacation, and right over there, something happened. And I said, okay, I need to come back. Came back, we did another extended study, realized that I have leukemia.
Right.
Went to the hospital. They give you the grip, if anyone has been diagnosed with something terminal, they bring a panel of doctors over there and they tell you, this is what's wrong with you. This is the treatment, put your affairs in order. And my question to them is, how do we navigate and how do we change the outcomes?
Right.
They didn't quite understand my question. They assigned me a doctor and they said, show up at the hospital. So I said, okay, there's not much I can do. I came home, told my family, we hugged a little bit and, I think so 2 days later, because I wanted to give 2 days, I had a friend of mine come over. We took some pictures of me just in case something happens.
Sure.
But something fantastic happened. That 2 days gave me time to reflect that I can decide whether I'm going to fight it. Like most cancer patients do, they say, we're going to fight the thing. Or am I going to make it another journey? So I changed my whole perspective and said, I'm going to make it a journey. I'm going to live day by day. I'm going to become an expert in the field, better than anyone else. And I'm going to expand my network. Mm-hmm. After all, we live in a global economy. And at least in bone marrow transplant, very few people know, Finland, Switzerland were doing bone marrow transplants in the 50s, 75 years ago, 40 years before the US. In fact, one of my best friends in Finland, I did not know till after the fact, his sister was actually one of the earliest bone marrow transplant patients in the world.
Wow. Okay.
And I've had dinner with her. So with that perspective, when I went back to the hospital, routine thing, they do a bone marrow biopsy, they come back and try to analyze. But what was fascinating was the minute I walked in over there, they took the biopsy and they said, we need to start treating you tonight. And I said, you do not even know what kind of leukemia I have. And whatever you give me is going to be irreversible. So that started the whole journey and the transformation to sort of say, what do we do? How do we do? And stuff like that.
Sure.
But to make a long story short, and I'll have to tell this story and then go back and retrace the steps. I have a rare kind of leukemia. It's MDS turning into AML, which means it's a constant moving mutation. It's not static and all. The chances for recovery is very, very small. I think so it's less than 1% chance of survival.
Sure.
And then on top of that, the mutations were such that they're very, very hard to put in remission and everything else. So most of the people die.
Sure.
They give you a good statistic that 35% of the people live in 5 years, but that's cumulative, not for that kind of leukemia. Right. And I literally said, I need to step back, walk away from the hospital. And they said, we have the whole, thing prepped. We have the chemicals over here, everything else, because we're going to start the chemotherapy today. I said, no, I'm going to go back. I need to really figure out what's going on. What I was really doing was I was trying to analyze not just the treatment, but the attitude of the doctors and whether I could work with them. Remember, life is teamwork. And you got to choose the team we work with. Unfortunately, most patients decide not to avail of that opportunity. They're given a doctor, they say we're going to deal with the doctor. So I said, let's find out the results of the biopsy. And the biopsy basically confirmed. So the doctor was exactly right. What she had determined was wrong with me. And it was dire and everything else. But in 2 weeks, I ended up talking to another doctor, an older Jewish gentleman. He sat down with me for an hour explaining to me, here's your disease, here's the outcome, put your affairs in order and all, but I could have a dialogue with them about what's the condition, what research is being done where, and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So I went back to him and said, you know what? I want you to become the doctor, but let's plan and have a dialogue together.
Mhm.
So that was the genesis. So there are three tenets of my survival. Number one is teamwork. You have to choose your medical team.
Yep.
You got to have people who look after you and your interest.
Sure.
Because how you want to be treated, how people want to be treated are totally different. I started my journey. They gave me the chemotherapy and my body had, my bone marrow collapsed. In other words, my body could not produce blood. So for a year, I was in the hospital lying down in a 10 by 10 room. I could not leave the room because a basic flu virus would have killed me.
Right.
They were keeping me alive with antibiotics.
Mhm.
After a year of that, I said, I need to walk away. I'm dying over here anyway. I can't leave. I can go home. I cannot do anything. I drove away from the hospital, went to Stanford, ran into a young doctor, a bone marrow specialist. And most of the doctors said, we don't want to take you on. You're dying anyway. We're keeping you alive with bone marrow transfusions and all. But this one doctor, she basically said, you know what? I will try to do bone marrow transplant. The challenge is when I'm looking at your blood chemistry and your tissue type, we do not have a match.
Hmm.
So I said, okay, you don't have a match in California. Maybe you'll find it in the US. It turned out we could not find a match in the US, Europe, Australia, South Africa, anywhere in the world. So again, the thing is, what do? Do you die or what? So again, thanks to my doctor, we started communicating. And we were able to come up with an experimental technique to sort of say, okay, we'll try this technique. It may not work because my bone marrow is collapsed. They never have a patient. They've never done bone marrow transplant on a patient whose bone marrow had collapsed for a year.
Right.
So we tried the experimental technique. It worked. Mm-hmm. And I got into remission. So it gave us time. We knew the time was going to be limited.
Right.
But in that period, when I was in remission, something miraculous happened. For some reason, I learned the power of spiritual awakening. Mm-hmm. I got approached by Father Perry. Those are, who are Catholics. They probably know the name. He was the head of the Franciscans at the Vatican. He blessed me. He invited me over for the 800th anniversary of the Franciscans on August 4th, 2016. Mm-hmm. I got blessed by the head rabbi in Israel at the Wailing Wall. Mm-hmm. Amachi, Karunamai, they're two Indian divine goddesses. They prayed for me in San Francisco. I know them personally now. Mm-hmm. And Kutinla, who's the head oracle of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, mm-hmm. He came and spent 3 hours with me in San Francisco and blessing me and all. Wow. So that gave me a different perspective to sort of say, there has to be a journey and everything else. Some of the lessons I learned is what you talked about earlier, is you really have to calm yourself down, bring yourself at a different level. So in the second part of the journey, I took those lessons to heart. So obviously, if you haven't quite caught on with the story, I had remission. I had a relapse, but this time it had mutated. So instead of one mutation or two mutations, there were four. Mm-hmm. So, it had doubled. Really dark situation. The doctors came back and said, we can try to treat it, but this time we have to give you chemotherapy, which is 20 times more toxic than the one I got the first time. Right. Remember, the first time they gave me chemotherapy, my bone marrow collapsed. Right. At that time, the insurance company came back and said, we won't pay for it. You're going to die. It's too toxic. And even for normal people, 90% of people die with that treatment, during the treatment. And if you do survive, 90% of people die within a year. So it's very toxic. But I said, I'm ready to sign off and do that. But I took those spiritual lessons to heart and the practices they taught me. And I would go into deep meditation as they were giving me the chemotherapy, mm-hmm. where Stanford noticed that my heart rate would drop from 60 down to about 30, 35
Mm-hmm.
when they were giving the chemotherapy for 8 hours.
Mm-hmm.
The bells went off, the Christmas lights went off quite a few times saying, we need to bring the medical team, alert team over there. And I was perfectly fine. I would open my eyes and say, what's going on?
Right.
And then on top of that, we still had the challenge to find a donor for me.
Right.
And there was no donor for me.
Mm-hmm.
So despite the fact I'd done all of that, no donor for me. So again, my doctor came back and said, the same wonderful doctor who decided to take me, and that's a whole different story, but it's about women and women leadership.
Yes.
We sort of said, let's find a solution. And the solution ended up, let's go back to cord blood, which works for children leukemia, but not for adults over 60.
Mm-hmm.
But my challenge was there wasn't a single donor with 2 cords.
Mm-hmm.
So we located 1 cord in Singapore, 1 in Louisiana. The one in Singapore the donor was exposed to Hep C. That would have killed me.
Mm-hmm.
So just like in the first case where I was trying to find what to do, how to do with who's who in the world, we have to figure out how to get the stem cells from Singapore, Louisiana over here, treat them, inject in me, and literally, so I'm one of the first recipients to get 2 different cord bloods at the same time.
Wow. Okay.
And the miracle of all is, not only did I recover, I'm not on a single medication.
Wow.
Wow.
And the lessons I've learned in terms of working with different people, how to collaborate real time,
Mm-hmm.
and all the institutions putting the commercial interests aside, we can help save patients. So what my foundation is, and I started that while I was in my hospital bed, I'm working with some of the top institutions in the world, in Minnesota, in Houston,
Mm-hmm.
in Washington, D.C., in Sweden, to really talk with the physicians to say, you know what, we can make an impact in the patient's lifetime in terms of different techniques. And whatever you learn from one patient, because that was my journey, every day we would learn what was going on with me to keep me alive. Someone else, whether it was Sloan Kettering, Fred Hutch, Mayo Clinic, the doctor would say, try this. And my doctor was convinced to say, okay, let's keep on trying this to keep me alive. So that was the journey. But so now the foundation is basically trying to replicate that for brain tumors. And the reason we chose brain tumors up front is there has been no progress made in brain tumors in 40 years.
Wow.
No new medications, nothing. So we're starting with that, and obviously we will expand it to more and more diseases.
Wow.
But to sort of close out my whole story, is I would not be around. My journey was 5 years at Stanford.
Right.
Without being thankful to the people. My doctor,
Mm-hmm.
she literally was around me 24/7.
Wow.
Right at the end of my journey, I had to go to India because my mom passed away to sign some documents for her estate. While on the way back, my situation deteriorated really badly, where we had to make a decision whether to land the plane in New York or Chicago. And between my doctor and the pilot and we had to make a decision. Let's carry on to San Francisco. There was an outside chance I may not make it.
Right.
But it was safer because we had a medical team at
Right.
San Francisco.
Right.
And the plane landed about 2 hours late, around, I think, 10 o'clock at night. And there was a medical team waiting for me right outside to take me straight to the hospital. So I'm really thankful to everyone, the entire team, my doctor, the nursing staff, everyone else in the world who blessed me and who was part of the journey to sort of help me with that.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. Wow is an understatement. Kuldip, you've done a great job chronicling the events, and each one of them was insurmountable in and of themselves, let alone the chain of one after another after another. So the question that we have to focus on, because I one of the things that I learned a long time is your quality of life is in direct proportion to the quality of questions you continue to ask. And most people are framing their future by asking
Questions.
poorly formatted questions, or maybe asking no questions at all. And I saw at the very first, when you received the diagnosis and the prognosis from your first physician, and your first question is, let's see if I wrote it down here, how do we change the outcome?
Mhm.
So you immediately went to a question instead of just an acceptance and a declaration of, wow, this is bad, let me follow this, quote, medical scientist. He's a physician, right? And you asked the question from the very beginning, how do we change the outcome? And that started opening up all possibilities. So there's your questioning technique. What I want to ask is, there has to be something inside you that is your bigger why. It wasn't about the techniques, the how, or the what. You continually change those, but you're able to change those because your why was something different. Tell us what your why is.
I was afraid you were going to ask a question. As a child, I've been inquisitive. And I strongly believe, because of my journey and everything else, there's a purpose for me. And the purpose is to help and open up new boundaries. Whether it's in the spiritual sense, medical sense, and all. I sort of alluded to the fact I wanted to be a doctor, not a doctor to sort of say, I'm going to cure this or cure that or play God, but to help people using a collaborative technique to sort of advance science and make the world a better place. So it's much more of questioning, using the tools you have in front of you and making it better. And I'll give you an example. My idea about my whole journey wasn't about, do I live or not? But how do I, this was literally from day one, but how do I learn from this process and train, when I said not train, but elicit conversation and dialogue among the doctors about the humanity in medicine.
Right.
And the real testament was when I was, so a lot of the doctors I know, they know my doctor by name really well at Stanford. Right. I was in Washington, D.C., talking to someone who knows my story really well, and he's at NIH. Mm-hmm. And after he heard my story, he said, he's going to follow my doctor because they all publish and everything else. Sure. And he mentioned something that up front, she was very clinical in terms of all of her paperwork and all. Mm-hmm. But suddenly, after about 2016, 17, she started also to focus on the quality of life, mm-hmm. the makeup of the patient as they're going through the journey. Mm-hmm. Which if more and more physicians undertake, would really impact the outcomes. Patients would have a much better experience. And number two, they can make much better informed decisions in terms of what's working, what's not working. Right. One of the things that's lost in the whole thing, the reason I'm alive is because my doctor was willing to listen to me and say, this medication is too strong. I feel my heart palpitating. I'm having trouble passing water. Mm-hmm. Let's change the medication. Sure. And many times they would not see it on the monitor, but 2 days later they say, we can see your blood pressure rising or your creatinine level going up or something like that. Sure. But we were able to catch it real time. Yeah. The one time in 7 years I took my eye off the ball was in December last year, 3 months ago. Mm-hmm. Three pills later, I had a stroke. Mm. Oh. And it was a very generic medication that probably half of you guys take.
Sure.
But in 2% of the population, it causes stroke. And I didn't do my research. I said, nothing can happen to me. After all, I'm Superman.
Right.
And sure enough, I had a stroke.
Wow. Well, my friend, first of all, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your testimony.
Well, thanks for inviting me over here.
And what you have given us here is the ultimate thing that you're saying could change medicine is not for the scientists to get smarter and do more book training and do more in the lab. It's being collaborative and respectful of the patient and encouraging the patient themselves to adjust their attitude, because the attitude altered your outcome.
Yeah, I wish we had time to tell one more quick story, but that was really a turning point for me. It was around February or March. I think so, it was February 4th, 2015. So right after my bone marrow had collapsed, my blood counts weren't coming up.
Right.
I had a massive infection that took me down to the critical care. At 2:00 in the morning, the doctor came over, knocked on the door, dragged me down to ICU. They told me to bring the next of kin, bring the family over because you're not going to make it. That's the first of 6 times I got blessed at the hospital.
Sure.
There's a few who know that feeling or have heard that expression. And while I was in the room, I was literally in a comatose state. But I could watch from the corner of my eye. The doctor kept outside the glass door. She had parked her mobile station over there, and she was there for about 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
After 3 days, my fever virtually went down, and they said, "We won't keep you down over here. We'll take you back up to the oncology ward."
Mm-hmm.
While she was taking me up, I'm not sure what really happened to her, but she tried something because she knew that I was very engaging, very, very much into conversations and building relationships even while I was the patient. She started talking to me, and I was coming in and out, but she would say, "Do you remember I was there 4 days ago? I brought you down. I was asking you this," and I kept on nodding my head, and she kept on repeating the same question. And after a while, I got irritated. I'm drugged up a little bit and all. And she said something that blew my mind. She said, "Kuldip, when I was bringing you down, you weren't paying attention to me, but now you're checking me out." I did a double take. I said, this lady is talking to me. She's talking to me at a very different level. She's trying to wake me up because here I am. I've accepted myself as the patient.
Mm-hmm.
And she's telling me there's a little bit of me alive as a human being,
Right.
who wants to connect with people, who wants to engage with people despite the thing. Literally at that moment, and I have a picture, in that time frame, I made up my mind, I'm going to beat that. Mm. And even my doctor, Dr. Kaufman at Kaiser, he sort of said, every time he saw me after that, he saw much more change in my attitude in terms of determination and trying to find a solution, much more aggressively than before.
Sure.
So that was my turning point.
There it is.
I'm hesitant to tell the story because, people can take it different ways. But, I always bow down at the story, and I've yet to go back and see the doctor again at Stanford, not at Stanford, but at the other hospital.
Right.
But that was my turning point in terms of saying that, people do connect, they understand, but number 2, that they gave me the determination to say, you can fight it.
Yes. And that's the last part, that grit. It's a term that Dr. Duckworth, she's the expert, worldwide expert in grit in her studies. And there was your turning point. There was that determination that you were, a lot of the members of Better Each Day, they know I wear this dog tag that was created by Navy SEAL, and it says NDCQ, not dead, can't quit.
Yeah.
And so I wear this every day, and I have a challenge coin that sits on my desk. And this is a perspective. This is the perspective that works for me. And whatever talisman works for other individuals, I encourage each to find out whatever that is that allows you to have this as your touchstone. Okay, that's that thing that you keep coming back to. Your perspective right there, your determination to continue to be human, to not accept yourself as a patient, and to acquiesce to the diagnosis of general medicine. And that made all the difference and allowed you to be here inspiring us today that whatever obstacle the Creator has put to challenge us and see what we're made of. To me, that's what life is about, is to find out which ones of us are going to truly have that faith in life and that there is something greater, and that your perspective that you said, I thought was very eloquent. You said your purpose was to help and to open new boundaries. And that level, your bigger why, is what drove you through those, not just days, not weeks, not just months, but years of one obstacle after another that would have taken most people's character, taken their heart, their soul, and crushed it. And you kept finding a bigger reason. And here you are today with opening this incredible nonprofit and already making such incredible strides worldwide to change the way healthcare is delivered. And all I can say is thank you for spending time with us this morning and sharing your story. Thank you.
Well, thank you for giving me a platform to share my story. Literally, this is the first time I've come on the platform to talk about the story, but I'm pretty sure it's not going to be the last.
I don't think so either.
I'm hoping, my friend, when I share this recording with a couple of other good friends, I hope it does cause a chain reaction, because you're truly inspiring, and I so appreciate the insights in your articulation that you've given us that allows each of us to then take that and be able to apply it to our own lives and to share with other people in our own centers of influence, that we can encourage individuals that just because someone has said, hey, the general prognosis means that this is game over, and that doesn't have to be that. It surely doesn't. So, my friend, thank you again, and I hope to spread this and open up a few other things, and that might add a few other hours on your day, but you've got to share this incredible story. So thank you so much.
I'd love to. Just in closing, I would like to appreciate, if I could make a quick pitch. If you get a chance, please take a look at the website, neuvisium.org, neuvisium.org. And if you can contribute to help us move the message forward, if I were to share some of the emails and text messages I have from who's who, and I'm not talking about people like you and me,
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about who's who in terms of physicians,
Right.
You will cry.
Wow.
They basically are saying we're being entrusted with treating tumors, patients, and cancers.
Right.
We're not making any progress. We need your story, your techniques, and all to move forward.
Wow.
And I'm putting it very, very mildly.
Well, I shared the link in the chat with everyone so that each of you can not only take a look at that and consider donating to what Kuldip is doing to make a global change, but also share this. Share this on your social media. Share it with those people that you care about. And I'll have this interview available probably later today or tomorrow. I'll share that with you. And if you want to put that on your social media or share it with individuals that need that inspiration, please do that. We'll have that here for you. Kuldip, thank you again, my friend.
Well, thank you.
Sharing and time.
And, I look forward to meeting each one of you individually. If you have any questions, please share my email address or contact information. Okay. And I'd love to, talk to, engage with, or help anyone.
Absolutely. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
So what we'll do here, we're going to cut the next program that we do on Compass. So we'll close up here in about 30 seconds. I put the link in the chat if you want to move with us to the next event. I'm going to take about 60 seconds here, and then I'll be back online with that. grab a cup of coffee, come back in there. We'll do the live Q&A on our Compass device so you can work through on our evolution of how we're working on that together. And the link is in there if you have any questions. I will see you. Give me about 2 minutes and we'll be on there. Again, Kuldip, thank you, my friend. I appreciate you so much.
Well, thank you so much.
We'll talk to you soon, my friend.
Okay, bye-bye.